Once again, I'm really excited to introduce a very, very special gentleman in my life. He's a brother from another mother. He is the Chief Operating Officer of the Mavette Way Community Empowerment Movement Network. Mr. Barry Menser, good morning. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Mr. C. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Before we get started, very briefly, just tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Just to share real quickly, as a young child, I grew up with my grandparents, my great-grandparents, etc. And as a child, I used to learn to sit around and listen to the stories because they believed in not to speak until you're spoken to. So I learned to hopefully become a very good listener. And over the period of time, that has paid out very well in terms of being a pretty good listener in terms of the clients, basically having the opportunity to work with clients and be involved in a variety of communities, Black community, Asian community, Native American community, Latino community, etc. They're all part of my client base. And one of the things that I didn't really realize until Mr. C was asking me about this today, when I decided not to become a minister, basically learning German, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, I became involved with training programs for youth. And my first job, I was making $4.25 when I started a month, went to $4.50. Then a agency was sponsored through the city of Gary, Indiana, asked me to come to work for them, and I got big raise to $600 a month. And I really didn't think about it until I was thinking about this call. At the time, I had the ability to go down when I got my second car and do what's called a signature loan, where I just signed a piece of paper that said I'm going to pay the money back, and they gave me $3,000, which is almost half of my salary at the time. And understanding the process that we go through in terms of our funding. And as I've said to Mr. C and Ms. Deborah Day, if I had my preference, before any client could be processed, I would have them go to the bank and apply for a loan so they could see the process that goes through, or they could be reminded. Because we don't think about it often, but if you apply for a credit card, you apply for the purchase of a mortgage of a home, etc., buying a car, there's always questions that ask things like your Social Security, how much income are you earning each month, etc., etc. And then often there's a verification of that income. The beauty of what we do is that the program that is our basic funding program that we offer to everyone, it does not require verification of income. It doesn't require a 4506T, which is an authorization from IRS to get your last 3 years of tax returns for both personal and business if you have business. It doesn't require bank statements to show how much income you're actually receiving. It doesn't require any type of verification of income. It doesn't require any collateral. Strictly based upon your personal credit profile, your personal credit scores. Now, you may think, well, okay, I've got my 700 scores, I'm good to go. But without getting into a lot of detail, it's not just having 700 scores. It's based upon what makes up those 700 scores. What type of trade lines or what type of credit have you established showing that you are dependable, reliable, and that you have the ability to manage your funds and make your payments on time. Ultimately, the way in which I always try to share with clients is that you're sitting on one side of the table and the bank or the lender is sitting on the other side of the table. And the bank or the lender, they're thinking, okay, if I authorize these funds for this individual, I've got two primary concerns. Number one, I want to get back the original amount that was authorized or that they've been able to use. But more importantly, I want an ROI, return on that investment, because I'm not here just to hand out the money. I want to make money on the money that's being handed out. And the individual is sitting there thinking, how do I get money from their side of the table to my side of the table? And it's very, very important in terms of the process that we go through, that the factors that I mentioned before, no verification of income, no tax returns, no bank statements, no collateral, those are all elements that can be considered when you're going through the normal process of getting funding from the bank. Why do you get real estate above and beyond everything else? Is because it's collateral. If you don't make your payments, it can be repossessed or it can be taken. Why do you get a vehicle? Because it's collateral. If you don't make the payments after a certain time, you can wake up one day if you don't have a garage and your vehicle has now disappeared because it's been repossessed. So those are things that doesn't take place in terms of our primary program. But you can, as I said, have 700 scores, but maybe you've only gotten credit recently. You've got maybe 3 or 4 lines of credit, but they're recent. So the bank hasn't really seen a period of time where you've made 4 to 6 payments and that you've created a track record that says you're a good candidate for providing funding without any of the verification information that we've talked about. So as a result of how we approach the situation, sometimes in the primary program, while we do focus on getting business credit funding because it has 0 interest rate, and more importantly, it does not show up on your personal credit profile. So it has a separate profile that operates out there that has no direct connection with your personal credit profile unless you default or you make payments that put you into a jeopardy scenario. Then it can show up and will show up on your personal credit profile. So it's important to keep in mind that there are 2 profiles that are running. One is personal and one is business. And a lot of times clients will not have a business credit profile, and we will work with them to create that profile. Sometimes we may need to strengthen their personal credit profile before they can get business credit funding. And sometimes we can do what's called a mix or match, where they'll get some personal credit some personal funding, and they'll get some business funding. So the key to everything that we do is keeping the client aware of that particular basic program. We do have a second program that Mr. C has negotiated and put together that's designed for our investor coach, trainer, investors. And the key to that particular program is it requires a different mindset. It requires a different management of resources. The reason that we do what we do is always designed to get a client, a coach trainer, a member of the community to make their dream and vision become reality. What is their dream? What is their vision? And I remember when Miss Day and myself were first starting to work the program, we had a young lady that had a facility where she was helping people that needed help. And her lease payment was behind schedule, and she came to us and needed $10,000 to keep the doors open. And we were using a particular resource, which was a little, perhaps in a stricter vein. And they basically said, well, we can't do this because, A, she hasn't filed her most recent tax return. B, her organization in terms of her nonprofit is not active. And so that was an issue. And so we were kind of like, how can we help this person? And Mr. C said, no, I'll never forget this. Find a way to help her. So we went through some resources. We were able to get her corporation back active. We were able to get her tax return filed and verified and in the system. And we were not able to get her $10,000. We were able to get her $9,000. and that made a difference of her keeping her doors open. So that has always kind of stuck with me in terms of trying to find that extra avenue, that extra resource, that extra step to make things happen. And the great news is one of our resources is now working in terms of our regular program, and some of the things we'll do with our coach trainer investor crusaders is to provide some additional information that assists the blueprints that Mr. C does with everyone in terms of getting them on the pathway to make their dream and their vision become reality. That's kind of a quick run through, Mr. C, in terms of what we do and how we do it.
Great information. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of go back to a few things you had mentioned, one of them being 0% interest rate. Now, I want you guys to really listen to this because this is important as an investor. And also, I want to elaborate on how that is significant for a investor, first an entrepreneur, and second for an investor. How significant is having funding that has a 0% interest rate for 6 to 12 to 18 months? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, it's huge because basically you're using other people's money, which in this case is the bank or the funder or the lender, and you're not being charged an interest rate. So now you've got the availability of taking those funds, investing those funds, and getting a return in terms of your particular investment. Now, in the case of real estate, it could be something that you're purchasing and you're going to hang on to a hold and you're going to have tenants in there making payments, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point, instead of it being zero interest, you have a setting where you'll now start to pay interest. But the key is it changes your cash flow. It changes the money that you're able to set aside. And more importantly, the way the program works in terms of my first exposure to one of our underwriters, he shared with me that he has not actually paid any interest because what he does is when right before his non-interest or zero interest program gets ready to go to an interest-bearing scenario, he goes back in and gets a new zero interest funding and then transfers the old funding to the new funding, and now he's on zero interest rate again. So if you're actually able to manage and understand the system, theoretically, you could be in a situation where you very seldom ever paid interest, or in some cases might not ever pay interest in terms of setting. But from an investor's perspective, that's like the holy grail, because often when you're doing, particularly in terms of real estate type projects and other large projects, you're in a setting where you have to give what's called hard money. These are individuals or resources that are providing funds to you, and they understand there's a high risk of that particular project or a higher risk, so therefore they're charging you a certain higher rate of interest. But it still will make sense if the numbers work out in terms of either doing the hard money type situation. So it's a beautiful, beautiful situation when you have the opportunity to have zero interest rate, where you're able to use someone else's money. And theoretically, depending upon the project, you can actually get the funds, take care of your project, cash out your project, and pay off the funds that you have, never having paid any interest. So it's a tremendous, tremendous option that you have, Mr. C.
Excellent. Now, we're giving you a lot of information in a short period of time. I just want to once again identify there are two different programs we have. One for our clients who are members, and to become a member is only $10 down and $10 a month. And then we have another program for our coach trainer investors, which is a more aggressive program. We have to have individuals go through a process where we vet our members to make sure that they understand the dynamics of finances and understand the dynamics of investing. But I want to stay, Mr. Menser, with the one for the clients who are members, the $10 down and $10 a month program. Could you let our listeners know how the process works in reference to taking advantage of that program, please?
Well, the great news about it is we use right now a specific credit monitoring company where the individuals can at least get an initial assessment of where they're at. It's actually free for the first 7 days, and then it does have a monthly fee after that point. So basically with that program, we can understand and see where a person is at. Sometimes they're good to go, as we would say, in terms of move forward into funding programs. Sometimes they may need some work on their file. So we do have the ability to put them into our resources where they can get a complimentary credit restoration building program. And then once that has been completed, they can then go forward in terms of funding. The most difficult thing for most people is everyone is impatient. And whether we're talking about going through the complimentary credit building program or we're talking about the funding, and I think you use this example when you put popcorn in the Microsoft and it says 2 minutes, we have a tendency not to wait until the chime goes off and says the 2 minutes are up, and we want to go into the system earlier than the 2 minutes. And often, in terms of what we do, that's the hardest thing of individuals to understand, is that it's a process that there are certain steps that have to take place in that process, and it doesn't permit you to bypass or accelerate, et cetera, because at the end of the day, he or she who has the money makes the rules, and that's the process that we also go through.
Excellent. So once again, just backtracking, you pay the $10 down, $10 a month. You get a credit report. It's $1 for processing, but they give you the actual report that would normally cost $29 for free.
Correct.
For 7 days. Correct. So for 7 days, family and guests, you get this credit report for free. It only takes us how long, Mr. Menser? Let's say they have good credit scores. There's two clients, as you just mentioned, individuals who have the credit scores that we can put into immediate funding, and we give a pre-qualification. How long will it take to get the pre-qualification?
With our system, as it currently stands, it would run, in terms of normal scenario, 48 hours, for 2 days, 2 business days primarily, sometimes 3, just depending upon the workforce. But they'll know within, say, no more than half of the time of their free 7 days where they're at.
Excellent. So once again, family, once again, friends, you get this credit report. Now, you do have to cancel it before 7 days or they will charge you, but within 48 hours, we can give you an answer. And we give you a range of how much money you can get. Is that correct, Mr. Menser?
Yes. Once our underwriting looks at everything, they'll give a estimation of the funding that can be obtained. And the beauty about it is that they're very, very good in terms of the estimation, because they work directly with the underwriters of the lenders and the banks. And they also, more times than not, the amount we try to under-promise and over-deliver, so that whatever the amount is, we can't guarantee, but we'll be pretty confident we'll at least hit that amount. But in most cases, it will actually be an amount that's higher than that.
Excellent. Now, we talked about no interest rate, but another major advantage, and I want you to elaborate on this, is when they do get funding, the majority of funding is what we call business funding, but not just business funding, what we consider to be true business funding, because it does not show on our client's personal credit file, which is TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Could you explain the significance of that for an entrepreneur as well as an investor, please?
Well, it's a huge situation and scenario because most of the time entrepreneurs, sometimes even investors, usually start by using their personal credit. And whether you get into high need of credit or high usage of credit, then when you want to go, because now you have a specific need, you have an emergency, whatever that may happen and take place, your lines of credit, your lines of available funds are either maxed out or close to being maxed out. And it's now really, really tough to get additional funding in terms of on your personal side. Because with the business funding, with the zero interest rate, it does not show up on your personal credit profile. So as long as you take care of the business credit profile, you actually have the ability to go in for multiple rounds where you can go in and get additional lines after 4 to 6 months in most cases, where you've shown that you have the discipline, you are responsible, and the lenders, the funders know that you make your payments on time. We're not going to have to try and track you down, run you down, etc. And you're not at risk of not paying the funds. So it makes it very easy in most cases to be able to go in and get additional lines of business funding at zero interest rate for 6 to 12 to 15 months. That then keeps it off of the personal credit profile, and it's just really taking advantage of how the system operates, because your personal credit profile is what puts you in a position to get the business funding, and your payments in terms of timely payments in terms of business side, etc., permits you to maintain separately your personal credit profile from the business credit profile. The only time that they will kind of merge will be if you basically screw up on the business side, then that can be posted in terms of your personal credit profile and show up on your personal credit profile.
And you had mentioned having the ability to go multiple rounds. How significant is that for entrepreneurs as well as investors?
The ability to know that if you take care of what you need to take care of in terms of making payments on time, remain disciplined, to know that every 4 to 6 months you have an opportunity to go in and get additional funding, because now you've created that track record and that relationship. And to me, relationship is the most important thing. When I was doing financial retirement investments, I remember I worked for a multi-million-dollar company. The parent was a multi-billion-dollar company. And my home office had told me that one of my clients had said such and such. And I said, my client didn't tell you that. And they said, well, how do you know if you haven't talked to the client? I said, because I know my client. If I told my client right now to go stand buck naked on this intersection, he would do that, because he knows I would never put him in a position to embarrass him. So that's kind of how the system works, is that you don't want to put yourself in a position to embarrass yourself by not taking care of your business funding side, which then keeps your personal side also clean and free as long as you take care of your responsibilities on the personal side.
You know, let's elaborate even more on that. We call our program our business and bank, which is your bank is your business, meaning going multiple rounds and managing it. Why is that significant for an entrepreneur? A lot of entrepreneurs say, well, I only need this amount of money. But we advocate them and try to teach them how this component of it being a business for their business is extremely important. Meaning this being a business, getting the multiple rounds, that being a business for their business is important. Why? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, the simple part is a thing of life, whether we're talking about the personal, but particularly in terms of business. There's one element that we all face, and it's particularly can be threatening, dangerous in terms of business or an investor, is the unexpected, the thing that based upon your best intentions, your best planning, etc., things that you cannot control, things that can come up. You have a situation and scenario where you're purchasing a house, and then you find out that despite best situations and scenarios, well, in fact, I'll use an example. We purchased a house for my mom, but when we did the inspection, even though it was a brick house, it was on the older history, there were a number of things that needed to be done, ranging from the basement, the roof, water that could seep up through the foundation, et cetera, et cetera. So the unexpected comes up in a lot of situations and circumstances. You might even have scenarios where a family member, a loved one, a parent, a brother, a sister, et cetera, child has a financial need. And now you've got to also figure out, how am I going to take care of my investment? How am I going to take care of the business side, but also help this person who I love and really care for in terms of my personal. So by having that separation, then it does not put your primary investment or business operation in jeopardy, because you've maintained both your business side and you've also maintained the personal side.
Excellent. Well said. And I want to elaborate once again, folks. It's $10 down and $10 a month, and our cause is $1 billion in funding for small businesses of color. And we do have a position in our organization for businesses on a referral base where you could pay $10 down and $10 a month. We have a referring partner. And envision this. We have signs that say 50 to 100,000 a month. 50 to 100,000 for funding, excuse me. Picture these signs in small businesses throughout the community where those particular businesses can advocate the cause, but also get a referral fee. They can pay $10 down, $10 a month, promote the process, and get a referral fee. We call that a referring partner. Could you elaborate on that, Mr. Menser?
Well, the business situation scenario, we basically do have signs that we can promote, either window signs, signs that can be put on the wall, put on a tripod, et cetera, within the business. And what it does is it permits the businesses with not a lot of work on their end to be able to take their normal customers, clients, and show them a way in which they can get funding, and then that particular business can also receive compensation as a referral fee for that situation. Like, for an example, my wife has what we call the car magnets on her car, and she also has this sign in her business. Right now, she's kind of sidetracked because she's doing some renovations and upgrades in terms of her shop. But she also has personally taken advantage of the business funding program with the zero interest rate. And surprisingly, she has always hated American Express, but that was one of her business lines coming from American Express, and she actually surprisingly used it because she doesn't like American Express. But with the zero interest rate, I think it kind of changed her approach or her attitude or thinking in reference to American Express. But in her particular case, usually her usage is around 23 to 25%. So, but in terms of basically having that situation where people come into her salon and they can see what's taking place, and she does have the ability to, let's say, share information with her clients, and whatever situation is available, she's pretty good at sharing the information and getting people excited about making their dream and vision happen and take place, which we've gone through several different programs, which she's assisted us in promoting through her business.
Excellent. Now let's transition over to the Coach Trainer Investor Program and the resources that are made available to our coach trainers, not just in reference to getting the money, but educating them and allowing them to take care of the resources to invest their money. First, let's elaborate on how significant that particular program is. Now, to be a coach trainer investor, you got to pay $10 down, $10 a month, but also you have to be website certified and go through our process of being in a chapter and being on calls like this. How significant is that business funding program for our coach trainer investors, Mr. Menser?
Well, that program is significant for those individuals that want to step up and take advantage of it. It does require, because we're talking about larger sums of funding taking place, so we're talking about a different system of managing those funds and staying on top of being responsible for the payments, etc. But what it does is, because you do have the larger infusion of funding, it now permits you to take advantage of some of the programs that are available, where you can basically go through a education training program to become a day trader, where you're able to invest some funds and learn how the financial world really operates, and be in a position to start at your comfort level in terms of understanding how the market operates, being able to be in a position to earn money on a daily basis, working a few hours every day. It's not a get-rich-quick situation scenario. It does require time, does require energy and effort, and it does require a learning curve that takes a while before you're in a position where you're able to basically get yourself in a position where you can earn, where the only limitation on earning is going to be based upon what you put into it. But we have to always remember that this is a process, and if all you had to do was just go through the training program, invest the money, you're going to make $1 gazillion, everybody would do it. It does not work that way. It's like everything else. You do have to put time, energy, effort into the program, but it does offer the possibility of rewarding you with a cash flow that helps you pay back the funds that you have gotten to make the investment. We also have the stock option program, which operates off of a newsletter service, and it also puts you in a position where it's a more passive scenario, but it does offer the opportunity to have a 10% return on a monthly basis. Some months a little bit lower, some months higher. But again, it puts you in a situation where you're able to take a portion of the funds, put them aside, and invest them so they can give you cash flow that also helps you to repay the funds that you're using. We also are looking at the real estate investment program. We've looked at different places throughout the country and then found out right in our backyard there was a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of an investment situation, and we've been fortunate and blessed by the Creator to have come into our community, Mr. Derek Clemens, and he's done, in a short period of time, he has provided a funding allocation for our family in terms of the Mavette family, Mind, Vision, Energy, and Technology. And so that is a great asset that is available, because it's not just receiving the largest sums of money, always remembering that what you receive, then you must pay it. And so you do have to take into consideration when I get these funds and I use them, there is a repayment requirement. And what are some of the ways in which I can take some of the funds, set them aside, and generate a revenue that will provide me the means of paying back the funds without being under stress and strain.
Excellent. And I'd like to elaborate on that in reference to the real estate for our coach trainer investors and future coach trainer investors on the 19th. We're going to be meeting with Mr. Clemens, and we're going to the high desert to first have a investors training, and then we're going to be able to look at properties on the 19th, and then that's part one, and then part two, Mr. Clemens is going to finish the training at the DoubleTree Hotel in Culver City, California. We have Friday night where we're going to do a free meeting on the 20th. Part two will start at 9 a.m. on the 20th and end at 4 p.m. Then we're going to take a 3-hour break and then come back with a free meeting here in the Los Angeles area. Then Saturday, we're going to have a training from 9 to 6 for our future coach trainer investors and for our coach trainer investors who are in now. And then Sunday, a special meeting. Now, we're going to take just a couple more minutes, Mr. Menser. You talked about the day trading. This particular call is utilized for day trading. The stock market opens up at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So normally we go through protocol, what you've heard this morning. We will go through the meditation. We go through the 10 Commandments. We go through the Breakthrough Declaration. And then we go through breakthroughs. And then at 9:30, the market opens. We continue with the meeting, but we have a platform that our members pay at least they go through training for $2,500. It will be $5,000 eventually, but they go through training. And then they pay for a platform of $2,500, and they get $50,000 worth of buying power. So that platform is connected to a hedge fund in Hong Kong, and it allows us to trade live on Wall Street. But you had mentioned the option trading, Mr. Menser, and you talked about a 10% return. And I'd just like to elaborate on a simple theoretical example. So if somebody were, just an example's sake, were to have $50,000 in the option trading, once again, just a simple theoretical example, 10% of that would be how much off that $50,000?
Would be $5,000.
And if, say, it stayed consistently like that for 12 months, $5,000 for 12 months, how much would that be?
That would be $60,000.
So basically, just a simple theoretical example, add another 60, that would be 50 and 50. That's $110,000 in 12 months, based on and $60,000 net. Is that correct? Am I correct with those numbers?
Well, if you had 60 off of the option trading program, and you had 60 off of the other programs, that would be $120,000.
Oh, there you go. That's why he does the math. So obviously these are just simple theoretical examples. Any final words you'd like to share with everybody, Mr. Menser?
Well, the thing that I would like to share is one of the things that I've learned is that, as my great-grandmother used to always remind me, we all make mistakes. We're not perfect in terms of as individuals or as our company. But as my great-grandmother reminded me when I was growing up, that's the reason they put erasers on pencils, because people make mistakes. But we have learned from our mistakes, and some of the things, looking back in terms of history, that we have learned to be, well, as one of our past presidents would always say, we have learned to trust but verify. And by that I mean people will come anytime there's any type of crowd or collection of individuals they'll come with the grandest of schemes or grandest of programs, et cetera, et cetera. And after a time, you kind of learn that, okay, it sounds reasonable, but where's the documentation? And that's one of the things that Mr. C pushes and pushes and pushes is the fact of documentation, because the things that we're sharing with you, we have documentation of individuals that have gone through the program, both in terms of coach trainers and clients that have received anywhere from $30 to $50 to $100,000 in terms of funding programs. We've had individuals that have gone through 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles, etc. We've got individuals that have taken funds and helped out their childhood friends to create that fire jerk chicken in Atlanta. So there's a variety of ways in which individuals have taken the funding. Some have actually used it to set up a business. Some have used it to take an existing business and infuse that business with additional funding. So there are a variety of documentations that take place. And the thing that I like the best is the fact that we always strive to improve. We are in what we call beta tests, which means that this is when things are being worked out and that things are not yet in a final format or status. And some individuals are comfortable with that, but some individuals, they'd like everything to be neatly in a package where the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and everything is working great. And in that case, it may not be something that's for them at this time, because we are in beta tests. We will officially launch in February of 2019. But for those individuals that are willing to understand that one of the things about what we do is there are a lot of changes that will and can take place. I'm not saying we're the only ones doing what we're doing, but so far we've not run into a model out there that does exactly what we do. We're blessed to have Mr. John Allen and his company that does the complimentary credit restoration program. We're blessed to have the credit monitoring information and knowledge that we can use the same basic format that most of the lenders use in terms of the credit monitoring, so that we are not having to try to interpret, translate, project what a score might be in one system as opposed to what it would mean in terms of what the lenders use. We're in a situation and setting where one of the things that I've learned in terms of situations is most of the things we do, whether we think about it or not, is based upon relationships. Some relationships are excellent, some are good, some are not so good, and some are terrible. So, but relationships are very important in terms of what we do, and in terms of what I do. My situation has always been based upon relationships, and sometimes relationships go great, and sometimes they're not so great. But hopefully, when you go through that process, you learn, and you learn to grow from the situations, both positive or if they're negative. And do we sometimes have situations we have to back away from? Yes. I mean, I've had an individual that called me and saying he has all this information and knowledge about funding, et cetera, and then in the back of your mind, you ask yourself, then why are you calling me if you can do all the things that we do? It does not compute. I can't use the other term that I've learned, but it does not compute. So the thing that individuals don't really understand is the heart and soul of the business funding program is Miss Deborah Day. She is very, very relentless. When I was actually doing more things out in the field than she and I would have friendly challenges. But she's that kind of person. It's not personal challenge. It's a challenge because by having the friendly challenge, it drives the company to a higher level of excellence. And that's, if you ever look at the story of Motown, that's one of the things that Barry Gordy would do with Motown is he would have the friendly challenges. And we don't think about the process that Motown actually would go through in terms of the songs. And one of my favorite artists is Smokey Robinson, and one of his favorite songs is My Girl. And people often ask him, well, Smokey, why didn't you keep My Girl for yourself and your group? And he said, no, because the individuals that had the talents to bring that song out the best, there were the Temptations. And David Ruffin had the ability to take it to a higher level than what we could do. So should I be jealous of the situation? No, because I wrote the song, I still get paid. And Motown got the exposure of the song, which helped me as a writer and as a performer. So that's hopefully the type of atmosphere, the type of environment that Mrs. C has created, where we do have friendly competition, but it's not one that is to put a person down. It's to help all of us reach a higher level of performance, a higher level of providing the services and the programs that we want to provide to our clients, to be in a position to get billions of dollars into communities that are challenged across the United States and eventually across God's creation. Back to you, Mr. C.
Thank you, Mr. Menser. There's wisdom for you right there, family. You just was handed an incredible amount of wisdom. Cup runneth over. As I always say, there's three types of individuals in this world. People make things happen, people watch things happen, and people say, what happened? You were exposed with a group of individuals who make things happen. I'd like to thank Mr. Menser. Incredible job as always. Be blessed, family, and we'll see you at the top.